Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Karen. My guest today, I have been trying to get on for probably a year, and we kept getting schedules mixed up and emails were lost, and we wanted to do this in person, but we're taping this during quarantine. I know it's June now, but we're in May, and I'm so excited to talk to I'm already stumbling. Darcy Staniforth. Darcy, thank you for coming on the show today.
Karen, I'm so glad that the universe has finally allowed us to come together, even if it's during quarantine.
I know.
Oh my!
Well, you would think.
Maybe it just thought our powers were too strong together. Too strong. Like if you put both of these women in the same room, we're just going to take over. So I get it. I get it.
Exactly. There could be some sort of vortex opening or something crazy happening. But we made it. And I love I love how your phone sounds. I have a really good sound guy that usually fixes it. But like if someone's out of the country on WhatsApp, I'm always white knuckling it over here as like I hear one syllable disappear and like that. So you sound fantastic. Yay. It's the perfect day. And you have been on Ryan's podcast with the most fascinating topic, which is problems with the paranormal. And folks, it's not what you're thinking. But let's start. Darcy, tell me about your background in the paranormal. Were you into the paranormal as a little kid? Did it just happen to you? Where did you begin?
So I have been fascinated and interested and experiencing the paranormal since I was a little kid. I was definitely the kid that, when they had those summer reading programs would be like, oh, go check out books. And I was checking out every book on ghosts and every book on hauntings and UFOs. And I still own my Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown book series, right? Like I begged my parents for those. Like I know that it's a weird thing. I need these, right? But I also grew up with both a grandmother, my Nan, my dad's mother, and other people telling me I was an old soul. So from a very young age, it was like, oh, you've lived a bunch of times before. Okay, cool. That was something that was just like, oh yeah, I'm an old soul. Like you're just told as a child, so you accept that.
Well, that's a beautiful family though. I always say, like, my family was neither for nor against the paranormal. They had some scary stories, but when I always feel bad for people that were either brought up in that strict religion where someone was telling them what they weren't seeing or not using this kind of, it sounds like they had a spiritual background there.
Yeah, and see, both of my parents are, well, my father has passed, but both of my parents are very open folks. And I mean, from some of my earliest memories, I can remember both of them telling me a ghost story that happened to them, a paranormal experience that happened to them when they were vacationing in England. And so it was always like, this was just kind of like, these are things that happen. And my father was in love with space and the solar system. And so he was very open to, well, what else is out there? And he was also a man that would talk about these deals that he would make with his friends, that if they passed within 6 months, they were to come visit him. Now, so it was just this very open thing.
Was he a scientist?
No, my dad by trade was an electrician. My dad was an immigrant to the country, and he immigrated from England as a young man and didn't have, honestly, formal education past what we would consider seventh grade in the States. Wow. But he loved to learn. He loved to read. He loved learning about science. So like I can remember watching Nova as a child, and he always would read Popular Mechanics, and he was into quantum physics. And his real project that he just loved up until the day he passed was really learning about magnetism and pure magnetism. Like we jokingly called him Magnet Man because
oh my
he was
God.
so fascinated by magnets. And so
I have to tell you, so I have taped 2 podcasts this week, both mentioned magnets, 2 clients this week that mentioned magnets. I have to get somebody on to talk about that. Was he looking at magnets as in the healing way?
he was looking at magnets in all ways. My dad definitely believed that a large part of healing happened also outside of the medical realm, and a lot of it had to do with mind and spirit. You know, my father would be the first to say, like, "Ooh, listen to the voice you're talking to yourself in." You know, he was like almost like this weird English Yoda. In a certain way.
I love it though, because also how brave I guess when we're younger, we're a little more, we think we're indispensable, but how brave to just come to America. Hey, I'm on my way. Goodbye. Here we go. I don't know anyone. Here we go. That's so awesome.
Yeah, my dad definitely lived an incredible life, and he, I definitely miss him, but I also feel like he shows up and is around. Like there'd just be days when I'm like, "Oh, hey Dad, how's it going?"
That's awesome. Oh, so he encouraged you.
Yeah, he encouraged me. Both of my parents are incredible supporters. Like, here's a prime example of the beautiful support of my parents is that as a child, when I was in around 3rd grade was like the big time of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus and their tiger tamer, Gunther Gable Williams. Right. So Gunther Gable Williams was like the guy. Now I know we've got like Joe Exotic and all that. Like, let's just leave that behind. But Gunther Gable Williams was this like tiger taming celebrity. And I can remember just being fascinated with big cats and wanting to work with them. So when it came to having to create that career diorama that your classrooms have you do of like, what would you like to be when you grow up? I was convinced at that time I was going to be a tiger tamer and work in this world, and bless my mother for sitting down and helping me build this diorama of being a tiger tamer. So they've been supportive through my, I have a background in performance with improv and stand-up, and they've always been incredibly supportive of that, of my writing, of podcasting. I mean, they are just amazingly open, encouraging people. The ironic part, you talk about like not being raised in a super religious home or super strict home. I'm the one that actually made that move for a lot of years, where I was just like, I had to kind of shut the paranormal world out because of the communities that I was with. But yet I was still having experiences. I was still having all these things. And so now I'm so glad that I've come to a place in my life where my belief pool is back open wide. Yeah. And that I am a happy and open person. I've always been an inclusive person. It's never been a question of like, oh, you're not allowed or you're not allowed. But it was just more of like my own self kind of patrolling, I guess, self-policing. So I'm so ready to like be back in this and be back in a really open way, like publicly. That sounds weird. Like I had this giant private life versus public life, but just to be able to say, yeah, I explore these things and not worry about what other right. I'm not worried about what other people think.
No, you're not. But you know what it is? And this is funny because almost yesterday I was like, what vibe did I send out? I got like 4 insults in a row. But one of them was like, hey, I love your podcast. But I roll my eyes a lot. And I wasn't sure. I was kind of like, well, thanks for listening. I think is that I don't know how to do that, but that really wasn't an insult. That was actually kind of cute. I liked that comment, but I had it's almost like, because this is, I guess, because I'm a comedian, it does not occur to me that someone wouldn't believe in the paranormal. And every once in a while you post something, I posted something and somebody goes, oh, I bet you're one of the anti-vaccinationers or something. It got very attacking, and it's like, yeah, I don't need that.
Right.
So I understand. Yeah.
Like for me, part of what I love about this world is I love the fun. I love the exploring, right? It's one of the reasons why I love Ryan Singer so much, is because of the fact that, the whole idea of it's more fun to believe. It is. It is more fun to believe, right?
And
like,
you have places to go. You're like, we got to go to that haunted place. We got to let you put yourself, you want to feel a different energy.
Yeah, I want to feel a different energy. And I want to, like, to me, I think it ties into one of my core truths as a person is that I'm a lifelong learner. And I always want to be learning. I want to be experiencing new things. I want to know what my friends love. I want to know what my friends are into. And so, you know, and I want to experience new things in myself. And so for me, it's like the paranormal world. I'm with you. Like, it sometimes doesn't occur to me. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, I have a friend who I'm like, you've experienced nothing you can't explain. He's like, it's all explainable. And I'm like, well, that's not fun, right? Like, I don't want to be the person that's like, no, there's no, absolute no way. But at the same time, I'm a really positive person. Mm-hmm. I'm an upbeat person. Now, I'm not positive to the point of ignorance by any means, because social justice is such an important part of any of the work I do. But at the same time, like, I also don't, to me, it's like, I don't want to go on social media. I don't want to go on podcasts and just be like this negative, condemning person. There's enough of that in the world.
Right.
I don't need to add to that.
Right. And that's what I feel like, because I, you know, there's always that option on Facebook a lot of people don't know about, which is pass by. Don't leave your opinion, you know, but it is, I see, and that it's everything I do. Like that's my comedy. That's my thing. So it's all just out there. In fact, it's funny because I'm getting ready to do some open houses for my tarot class. And there was that first instinct of, can you put that on your comedy page? And then I was like, yeah, who doesn't know you read tarot? So it's a weird, you know, it's like a weird thing to not be embarrassed, but be embarrassed. But I also feel like, as I look at the clock and it says 11:11, and folks, that was not your text. My dinged. I forgot to turn off my sound. I do that. I always leave that on, and people always think they get in the middle of my podcast. They're like, did I get a text? I feel like you're in the right time, and the explosion of paranormal on TV shows is actually, I think, just coinciding, and we're moving into the age of Aquarius. It could be very magical. So get on the train.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, the thing too is like, and in that, like, get on the train, and there's enough room for everyone, right? On the train. It's a long train, and it's going a lot of different places. And I think, you know, with any kind of area of excitement, or I call it nerdery a lot. I tell people, like, that's the kind of nerd I am, that you can like all of it. You can like some of it. It's okay. And you don't have to be like snobby about it.
Right. You don't have to be competitive or snobby. Yeah.
Right. Like those of us who've been into these kinds of things for a long time, even if not on a deeper level, even just like, oh, I just like those things. I just read books on ghosts, or I'm just into UFO documentaries, whatever it is. Like, there's no need to suddenly create a popular kids table for the paranormal. Like, it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah, I have. I always once in a while, every once in a while, we'll run into someone that's like, "So you're ripping people off?" No, that's not what you know what I mean? Like they will say that to you. So if I say I read tarot cards, they'll say, "Oh, you're ripping people off?" Like, "Oh yeah, it's a con only you and I know about." It's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. And it's just amazing how, but I'm always amazed when someone is just not open at all. But that condescending thing of that you're a nut, it's like, I don't know. I don't have patience for that, because I wouldn't do that to someone else.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that to someone else. And on top of that, like, well, first of all, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be on an investigation with you. And I can flat out say that just energy-wise, there's not shystery energy about you in general. Like, anyone I feel like that meets you gets your light and your joy and your fun. So I just want to put that out there for those of you who have not had a chance to actually meet Karen in person. I think you will get the same thing that I do.
Oh, I thank you. And also, I'm a terrible liar. even if I try. I am terrible. I get very nervous. And so I don't think I could rip someone off if my life depended on it.
Well, and I think also too is it's like, it seems like there are certain areas where it's like, I think belief systems in general, people feel that they have a right to comment and criticize people's belief systems if it is not their own. Because it's this whole idea that I think a lot of people who are raised fundamentally religious get in this idea of like, oh, you have to know your enemy kind of thing, which guess what? None of us have to be enemies. We can all be in this amazing kind of interbelief, interfaith kind of space where we learn from one another. Oh my gosh, the idea of learning from one another, right?
Yeah.
And so like when people get, like, how, saying, oh, you read tarot, must be a con. It's like, what? Like where, you donate, like, to me, it's like, oh, you donate to your house of worship. Are you buying into that con? Like, you're not going to say that. And that might not even be where you would like go belief wise anyways, but it's just like, why is it okay to say like, oh, your belief system is a bunch of BS, but mine's the one. And I get that that's right. Like a lot about the fundamental religion, but it frustrates me because I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing people's weird stories, especially like if someone's like, do you want to hear a ghost story? Yes, I do. 100% every time I want to hear your ghost story, your cryptid story, whatever your story is, I want to hear that story, right? And even if I don't fully engage with that story as like, hey, I'm all on board or I have some skepticism, that's still your story. I don't need to take anything away from that. I don't need to diminish it in any way.
Right. I have a big writing group of a whole bunch of people. And one of the jokes that I'm working on is that everyone wants a confident God, right? We want you don't want a God where you go, hey, what is your God like? Well, very insecure. My God is very insecure. But it's so funny because I kept going with that joke and I got to the punchline, which is we want a God that gives us rules to follow so that then we can judge others. And so everybody went, oh, that's too harsh. But I really think that's why a lot of people need these rules so they can look at someone else and go, you're doing that wrong. You're burning in hell, that kind of stuff. But yeah, we totally agree on that.
And it goes into something like, I don't know if you've heard of the concept of something called spiral dynamics.
No, tell us.
But spiral dynamics is basically in our life, these different spaces that we move through in order to kind of better set like our own boundaries. And some people will move through like all the way kind of through the spiral, and some people will move only to certain parts of the spiral, if it makes sense. Like they don't get all the way through the spiral. But one of the things about spiral dynamics is kind of the idea that you get to a place where, if you say you grew up in a very, very open, not rules, nobody really set boundaries for you, because you're moving along this spiral. And I'm simplifying this like for the sake of time, but
that's all I can understand is simple things.
You're moving along this spiral where you will go from, reactive and automatic, then you will move into like tribalist and animistic, into egocentric and exploitive, to then purposeful and absolutist. And it's in that absolutist part of the spiral where a lot of people, a lot of times, get caught up in belief systems, whatever that belief system is, where it's monotheistic, polytheistic, whatever, where it's like, these are the rules. This is the black and white. And if you are able to kind of broaden your belief system, then you move into other aspects of the spiral that are like multiplistic and materialistic and personalistic, hopefully then eventually coming to this place where it's truly holistic. Instead of just being an absolutist, hey, I can incorporate things from all kinds of different things. And it's one of those, because they refer to it as a spiral because of the fact that you have to move through all those stages in some form or another. But you might start on different aspects of the spiral in different parts of your life. And I know people that are just stuck on that absolutism. It has to be this way. I have to have answers. And a lot of that comes out of needing safety and needing reassurance.
Yeah, and it also comes out, in not all cases, but I think that's exactly it. People really would rather have you tell them the answer than have them look in their heart and see what they really feel. You know, I think it's weird, but sometimes being part of let's use the word cult, or a really strict religion is simply you don't have to think and you're not responsible for your decisions. I only did that because that's how I was told. You know what I mean? Is that making any sense?
Right. Well, and I think also, too, that our culture, especially American culture, really teaches us to trust experts and not ourselves.
Right.
So from very early on, you know, I work with a shamanistic healer that talked about the idea of your earliest wisdom, right? And she brings up the idea of like, when in your life can you look back to see when your earliest wisdom was told no or stopped? And we're just taught just not to trust ourselves because, God, we love experts. Do we love experts, right?
Yeah.
And you can even think about this in terms like I think about as women, right? Women who decide to deciding on a birth plan, right? So women who are having children and deciding on a birth plan and thinking about like for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, women were able to give birth and survive and their bodies knew what to do.
Right.
But then the experts came in and said, no, it has to look like this. It has to be, you have to have these drugs, you have to do it like all these things. So it's like, we're even taught in gendered ways not to trust ourselves, right? And that's just like one example. But I think that when we're taught for so long not to trust ourselves, and then someone comes along in a cult or a very strict religion or even, you know, outside of religion, like thinking about, like some of the crazy culty self-help groups that have come up, like that have destroyed people's lives, right? That these folks who, I shouldn't trust myself. Oh, well, we'll have the answers. Yes. Tell me who I should trust. Right?
Relieve me of this burden.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's going to get us into, when we come back after the break, that is going to get us into your educational background and how it goes with the paranormal. Hang on, folks. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, it's me doing an ad for me. That's right. I keep forgetting to say this at the end, so I had to take out an ad on my own podcast. First of all, thanks for listening, and I love all your feedback. If you have a comment or a story or just want to say hi, email me at karenrontowski@gmail.com. Also, go to karenrontowski.com or paranormalkaren.com, and you can get my tarot class. That's right. It took me 2 years to put it together. It's 8 classes, about an hour each. You will be reading tarot by the end. While you're there, sign up for my email list. Everyone should do this. I only send out an email about every 2 to 3 months, and it's filled with typos and misspellings, so you know I haven't been kidnapped, and that's the best way to keep up on comedy, dates, and whatever is new. While you're there, you can book a 30 or 60-minute tarot reading, or you can get a gift certificate for somebody else. I got a little bit of merch left. If you want a Paranormal Karen Shungite sticker for your phone to make it safer, you can email me about that, or I now sell Paranormal Karen reusable straws. You take them with you wherever you go. Maybe you're doing cocaine with someone that doesn't look like they're clean. Boom, you got your own straw. karenrontowski.com. So I'm back with Darcy, and you know what else it seems like, if I can remember this thought that came into my head, and I think a lot of my audience will get this, and it's not that I don't want experts, okay, but it's also, I mean, sure, it's like, look at the information on the coronavirus. It's all spread out. It's all over the place. That's why we're not getting along. Who are the experts? I think that guy's the expert. You're the expert. Sometimes the best information I get is from opening a book in the middle, from Googling it on YouTube, or just like, all right, let's see what information comes to me from the universe. And sometimes it's better than any expert I'll ever look up.
Well, and the thing too, like I hear that, like we rely so much on experts and then we don't rely on ourselves. But it's also my caution to who are the experts that we're looking to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because nothing, and this leads kind of right into this problems in the paranormal, but it's problems in a lot of our world, expert-wise, is that people don't truly know how to look up good experts. People don't understand that it is important to have real traceable sources. It is important. The data and the research and the statistics, while it may not be the most exciting stuff in the world, those kinds of things are very important because you can create this trail of understanding like, okay, these are the things that lined up to get us to the spot we're talking about, right? Whatever that spot is. Mm-hmm. Because nothing drives me crazier. And this comes from my academic training of being in a room where someone goes, I don't remember the source, but you know what I'm talking about.
That's me, unfortunately, half the time.
Right. But here's the thing. I also trust that you're not trying to do that in a manipulative way.
Right. This is just what I believe.
The challenge is when people go and say, oh, you know what I'm talking about. We have no idea when people go, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. They're making their own assumptions about what that person is talking about.
Right.
They're not able to then go back and say, oh, he or she was referencing this specific research or this specific video or this information, right? And there's so many things out there. There is wisdom from the ages. Like for me, one of the most life-changing things that has ever happened in my life is to be in the same space, I don't want to say room because it was a very giant hall, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It was incredible because of his, not only his message, but just the feeling of joy and peace in that room, right? Can I explain to people on a scientific level the way that your emotion? Yeah, sure. But I can't recreate that in a research form. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I'm not going to be able to say like, let me explain to you with really specific things about why I got this. But at the same time, if I'm truly saying to somebody, I am presenting to you information, you know, I'm reading John Tenney's newest book, Theoretical Weirdo, and I love John Tenney. And John Tenney is talking about, in part of the essays in this book, he is talking about the fact that peer review and having people, whether that is peer review in the academic world or being a paranormal investigator and being able to hand over your raw footage to someone and say, hey, check it out, tell me what you think. Like, these things are important because as much as we want to believe, I also need someone to tell me, oh, that was a balloon.
Right. You need someone to double check your picture or what. And you need to, do the situation. You know, it's very interesting how an expert has turned into being someone that has the most followers on Twitter. Because I know I've said this a couple of times, but this QAnon, I'm still that's a cult in itself. Oh yeah. And, you know, not just followers on Twitter, but I've told this story on a few other, on Ryan's cast, especially, but like, you know, I went to a talk once where somebody was considered an expert because of the amount of YouTube views they had. What? That does not make someone an expert. That just means somebody got a bunch of people to view their stuff. It got in front of people. But, I mean, you and I both in entertainment backgrounds know that there are plenty of things that get a lot of views that are just not necessarily good. Sometimes,
right?
You see a girl in a bikini, that's going to get a lot of views, not making her an expert.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that, you know, part of where this kind of, where does research, and I don't think I'm the first, by any means, the first person to kind of start looking at this. Because this whole paranormal investigation world is cyclical, right? There's experts that come before us, there are investigators that come before us, and there will be ones that come after we have shuffled off this mortal coil. But, you know, it's in my brain because my background, I have my degrees are in American Studies, which is the how and why of American history and culture. And while my focus has been American history and culture, it helps me look at culture in general, the how and why of culture in much larger ways, right? We have to consider how history is written, right? We have to consider the power dynamics, the gender dynamics, the racial dynamics. Right. And I think sometimes when we look at the subculture of the paranormal world, people don't necessarily think that those same kinds of issues are going to then seep into our subculture. Mm-hmm. But they do. They do. And it's one of those things where it's like I was at the first online Paracon, PhenomenaCon, which was put on by Greg and Dana Newkirk of the Traveling Museum of the Paranormal and Occults. And, numerous speakers brought up, number one, the fact that we have issues of like some of this evidence that definitely have racial stereotypes tied to them. But then, you hear about a lot of these like UFO, especially it seems to come up a lot in the UFO world of like, oh, these white beings and this great white race, and thinking about like the thing that so many conspiracy and paranormal people talk about, which is the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is one of the most, it is the most, it's been considered the most anti-Semitic work out there.
Now I'm going to take this back a couple, because remember, this is the first we're hearing it on this podcast. So When you say, all right, so when you're talking about the problems in the paranormal with this, say racism or sexism, mm-hmm. you mean with the beings or the participants?
It can be a little of both. Okay.
I mean, obviously the TV is not going to let a female lead a team, period. It's going to be all guys, whatever the dead files. If you're a female on TV, you got to be a medium. You got to make funny faces. You don't it's just, and I would say 70 to 80% of paranormal investigators are female, but obviously TV is like, well, we need this 22-year-old to do it. They all have to, that's the part I would know.
Right. And so we've got gender dynamics there, right? Mm-hmm. And the large amount of male teams, it's what Singer and I refer to as broast hunting, which is just like a bunch of bros like in a room yelling at people.
Yeah.
So you've got part of it is, yes, this is a field that is still very much dominated by white males. We are seeing some of that change because if you look on like a show like Kindred Spirits, right? Mm-hmm. Amy Bruni is not a 22-year-old bikini-clad female on this paranormal team.
Not at this time.
Not at this time. But at the same time, that's still not in the majority, right? Because the majority of ghost shows or paranormal investigation shows you're going to see are going to be these male-led teams that come from a very certain lens. Or like you said, the woman or the LGBTQ person has to be the psychic or the medium or have some other gifting and can't just be who they are.
Yeah, they have to be the flake. And also, and I do like Amy, but she started out, she was the young girl on Ghost Hunters and the pretty young girl on Ghost Hunters. And a lot of paranormal investigators that had more experience with her were not even going to be looked at. So she built up her career, good for her. And that's not about her, but that is the industry.
Oh, that's absolutely the industry. To be like, who should be where, and the idea that
that's casting.
As women, it's casting, and as women, how we have to even try to get our foot in the door.
Right.
Right. And that is because like the work that she, even the way that she cultivates her social media presence is so welcoming and so warm and inclusive. And I love that. Like, I think that's really amazing, but we all have to get our foot in somewhere,
Right. And she did make the best of what she has. Like I said, that's not about her, but had she been heavier, older, another skin color, she would not be where she is today.
Well, and that's the thing, like when you take meetings as, again, like the people are saying, oh, well, we want more diversity. So we want to have women and people of color. That's where this diversity comes in, right?
We need a Jennifer Lopez type. Can you get us a Halle Berry type so that it looks like we've made it diverse? Yeah.
Yeah. And so part of it is, yes, the problems exist with who is representing in this world, who we are getting to represent the face of this community. And so for me, I really try and, whether it be more public work or more private work, I really try to associate myself with truly inclusive people who are open to this world looking like everyone, not just a very specific type. So that is one end of things. The other end of things is the issues that come into, thinking about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, right? Mm-hmm. So we have people, the Illuminati. Oh my gosh, the secret society that is truly controlled, is truly controlling the government and the weather and, whatever things people love to say the Illuminati does. But the Illuminati is really, in many ways, a response to the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which for people who don't know is a work of anti-Semitic fiction that has been debunked and said it is a work of fiction time and time again. Based on another work of fiction, but the Illuminati sees this work that, according to I am by no means behind this, but the Protocols of the Elders of Zion claims that the Jewish people have a secret higher Jewish government that not even all Jewish people know about, and it's truly controlling the world.
Okay.
So the Illuminati is created by this guy who wanted to be a Mason, but he couldn't afford to be a Mason. So he decided to create his own group called the Illuminati. And then the Austrian government was like, hey, you created your own group, but you're also planning to assassinate government officials, so we're going to shut you down. That's in the 1800s.
Okay.
Then we see the resurgence of the Illuminati after the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, because this Illuminati is responding to, well, if people are saying that the Illuminati is supposedly, well, if the Jewish people have a secret government, well, we have to have a secret government in order to combat them. What?
Right. This is okay. So we have the Illuminati, or we have the okay. I think I'm following you here. Okay. So now this is all you're talking all in conspiracy, or it really happening?
This is conspiracy.
Okay.
This is what people are. This is in conspiracy. But again, this is where when people at this in this day and time start buying into conspiracies,
right?
And they start saying, "Oh, the Illuminati is real. There's these secret organizations that control all of these things." They're a secret organization. The Masons are a secret organization. The Rosicrucians are a secret organization. Like, there are secret organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, people, instead of learning the history of a secret organization, and I know people are like, but it's a secret organization, how do I learn the history? But they just glom onto something and they don't understand. And the reason I bring up the Illuminati and the Protocols of the Elders of Zion as an example is because of the fact that it's like, when you start to get into these conspiracies and you don't look at the longer history of how this conspiracy came about,
mm-hmm.
you may willingly or unwillingly be aligning yourself with racist and anti-Semitic, homophobic, sexist, misogynistic ideas.
Right.
And if you are buying into certain conspiracies, that's what you're doing. And this is where we see problems on that end of things. Because for somebody to sit like, I've taught on the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in my classroom because I'm also teaching my students about fake news.
Okay. And you know what, though? We never even got to that. Tell everybody what your job is.
So my outside of being in the world of the paranormal, I work at a university as a program coordinator with special populations, as well as a part-time lecturer in the American Studies department.
Okay. Okay. So what was the population that is about what does that mean?
So special populations are students that I happen to work with foster youth, first generation college students, and president scholars. So they're more special populations, sometimes protected by law. Sometimes they just happen to fall into very specific categories within the university framework.
Okay. And you just help them get started and navigate?
I help them get started and navigate through advising and some kind of life coaching, but I also work on event planning for our particular center. I'm being a little vague because I do want to protect students.
Sure.
But we do different kinds of programming, fun events, and then also events that help them get more set up for life, independent living skills, career things, stuff like that. So a little bit of a holistic approach on that.
Great. Okay. So now we can go back to you teaching them.
Yeah. And so as a part-time lecturer in the American Studies department, again, it's about the how and why of history and culture. And one of the things that I try and do with my students, because the demographic of students I currently teach, not only university level, but majority freshmen, newer students, I try and take modern day situations and connect them to the past, because I feel that people have a hard time recognizing their place in history if they can't connect it to their own lives or things that are currently happening.
Great.
And so I use the protocols of the Elders of Zion as an example as I'm teaching them about fake news and how and why it's important to understand real sources, the history of sources, how to disseminate, even to, look at a web address, because it may completely look like a true news source, but it's been a cloned website that is now just changed the slightest little thing that you wouldn't even think about, but it looks like it's ABC News. And what they've done is cloned the ABC News website and plunked in this fake story. And, and it's one of those things that grown-ups don't even think about.
Right.
Like, what do you mean cloning a website? I'm like, oh, it happens. Because where it gets extra dangerous is when people say, oh, go back and look at these sources. But then when people start calling every source and every expert and everything fake news, it's all fake, then you create this almost like schizophrenic mindset, this chaotic mindset where nobody knows how to trust themselves. Nobody actually knows, like you were saying, who the experts are. And they start just going down these cult-like rabbit holes that start spewing back things that are really dangerous, and not just dangerous for other people, but also dangerous for themselves. Right. Because there's, there are people that, I get, have you listened to so-and-so's podcast? Have you listened to this? And I'm like, that's not really, and I try and be very diplomatic,
right?
But I want to have fun and I want to be informed. I don't want to spread dangerous ideology.
Right.
So there's problems on both sides, right? I also think, because I do a lot of work on race and ethnicity in my academic field. And so when we even think about paranormal, like thinking about ghost tours, right? Mm-hmm. You go to the South and you tour a haunted plantation. And that becomes that level of what they call dark tourism, right? Which is, touring places or spaces where tragedy has happened or murders have happened, things like that. But when you get into going to a plantation and suddenly we are taking the lives of people who've been enslaved.
Right.
And kidnapped from their home countries and making them into paid entertainment.
I have thought that about plantations for the longest time. I don't think I've been to a haunted plantation, but I could not also to not teach the history with it.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I'm a huge proponent for is I feel like every paranormal investigation team, whatever, paranormal or occult, needs to have an actual trained historian and researcher on their staff. Because it's so important to be able to go back and to fix the story, right? And to fill in those silences and say, remember, this is a narrative, this is a story that was written from a position of power, from the winner, right?
Right.
And a simple thing people can think about even when they hear about enslaved people and enslaved Africans and enslaved African Americans is the stories we hear about an enslaved woman being someone's mistress. Oh, she was his mistress. It's like, no. Let's remember that mistress implies that she had a choice in the matter.
Right.
She didn't have a choice in the matter. So let's reframe that because she's probably the survivor of continued sexual assault, right?
Right.
But again, that doesn't sell tickets to a haunted tour.
Right.
And, even those racial dynamics coming in because you have people owning these plantations now, even having freaking weddings at plantations, which I'm just like, oh, why would you have a wedding at a plantation? But again, it's these issues of race or of the old tropes that you hear, especially when it comes to, haunted things. This is an ancient Indian burial ground.
Right.
Like, oh, please, the entire country is quote unquote an ancient Indian burial ground.
I've always thought that same thing. I've always thought, exactly. The whole country is. When are we going to have that?
So for me, part of the work that I want to really kind of move forward, it's like, I want to go on investigations just as much as anybody else does. Like, I love, like, when we did our Waffle House investigation, like, I ended up with an EVP. It was so cool. I was so excited, right? Like, that was such an incredible time. But at the same time, I also want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting, number one, the history of the place that's being investigated and the history of the people that are being investigated. Because that is just as important in this historical work as finding something cool. But we should not be finding something cool or getting to traipse around someplace on the backs of other people. That is not okay.
That is not okay. And actually, that's what kind of made that Waffle House really cool. Hang on a second, folks. We'll be right back. Psychic medium and buddy of mine, Terry Huberman, is with me today. Terry, you've given me so many great readings and healings, and now you've got everything together in one package. Tell me about that.
I sure do. So this package has energy healings, readings, and coaching.
Coaching, that's the best. And people, they buy the package. You give them coaching once a week?
Yeah, so we meet online once a week, and in between, there's support as well.
And who would this be for?
This is really for folks who are in indecision, needing to get into their intuition because they're blocked or stuck. They need to move forward. And so we explore what the root causes of the problems are.
And helps them get out of their own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Terrific. And what can they expect from this?
Sure. So moving from anxiousness to confidence, accessing their freedom, joy, and security, and really being in alignment with themselves so they have that clear direction, so they know, aha, this is what I need to do next to reach my goals.
So now there's something that's free so people can talk to you and see if this is for them.
Yeah, absolutely. On my website, terryhuberman.com, there is a page where you can click, and it's the intuitive coaching package. And there is a button there that says schedule a free call. So you go ahead, schedule it. We'll get on a call and you can learn more about this program, and we'll see if this is a good fit for you or not.
See if there's chemistry.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's an odd date.
terryhuberman.com, TerryHuberman. I highly recommend it, folks. Okay. I thought that so for folks that don't know, Ryan Singer and I did and Darcy was there. we did a investigation of, it's not a Waffle House like where you get waffles. That's what it's called. And it's in Orange County. And it was the first female, I don't have my notes in front of me. Wasn't that the first female doctor of Orange County lived in that house?
Yes.
And we got that very interesting EVP, again, another one right at the last minute, there was a call box. And if she was asleep on the second floor, there was a call box downstairs, and people could call up and say, "Doctor, are you there?" And it would wake her up. And my friend Christine had one. She said, I can't remember. She said, "Doctor, will you help us?" And immediately it was sort of like woke up this EVP that came through the little call box that said, "Doctor, can you help me?" And I was thinking, my first thought was, woman coming in the middle of the night, this is probably the first place women had the choice of abortions or whatever. You know what I mean? It was just very fascinating, the history of that place.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, I don't want to go in there just trying to get something to happen. I also want to go in there with an appropriate approach, right? Because, Karen's, for all of you to know, like, Karen's team was upstairs, our team was downstairs. And we were getting a lot of interaction with what seemed to be a child spirit. And the women, as we were sitting on the floor, got a lot of interaction. We're having all kinds of interesting things happen. But whenever the men would approach, they would get really quiet. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I always try and think about, like, history and context and cultural context, because for centuries, men would not have been, if a man was not someone's wife or someone's husband, he would not be alone in the same room as a woman, or even with girls or young girls, because it wasn't proper. Right. Yeah. So when you think about, like, these roast hunting teams going in and just, like, yelling at people, you're not, as a modern day woman, if a bunch of dudes in black ran into my house and started yelling, I would not have a great reaction.
Right.
So I can only think of, like, centuries old, spirits going, like, who are these people? Why are these people here? And, even thinking about when we try and interact with spirits, are we bringing more gendered toys for them to try and interact with? Like, are those quote unquote toys that, like, boys would have played with versus maybe something for a young girl, or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
I
even thought once I was in South Carolina and someone took me to a place that I believe was out on the island, and no one had been there. There was no electricity. There was nothing. We walked onto, it wasn't a plantation, but it was the South. So it was still a slave owner, a guy that owned slaves. And I remember someone saying, "Hey, you guys, or actually they were trying to talk to the owner of the house, who would have been white, and he said, by the way, we have a black president now." It was when Obama was in. And it struck me as such an odd, the whole thing. Like, if they can hear that, what are they thinking? Do they think we're like, it was just a fascinating sort of fold over of history to be able to say, hey, the president is black, to a slave owner. It was just I just remember that moment so clearly. So how odd.
Yeah. And again, it's this, I am all for people understanding, the good and the ugly of history, because we need to, because so many people's voices have been lost. So many people's stories have been lost because of the fact that they were not deemed important. They were not deemed worthwhile or worthy in general, right? Women's stories, people of color, all of these things. And at the same time, we need to make sure that as we are going forward in investigating, writing about the paranormal, talking about the paranormal, that we're being responsible with what we do.
And respectful,
And respectful. And my goal is to never in this world, as in the regular, the everyday world, I don't want to do more violence to people.
Mm-hmm.
I want to respect people's cultural beliefs. I want to respect people's religious beliefs, because of the fact that, like, I consider it an honor to get to interact with folks and to share history with people. But again, I won't do it on the backs of those who have come before us.
Right. Interesting. As what is your, what would be, let's say, a great, where you'd be like, oh, let's go there. That all sounds great. Let's go there. What would be your choice? Would it be like the Waffle House we went to, where there was a positive history there?
Yeah, I mean, I like going to places where there are positive histories, because I think it becomes a little bit, it's a different kind of doorway in order to introduce people to real history, for sure. I'm not opposed to going to places with negative or traumatic history. However, I also, because I'm an empath, feel all kinds of things. And so I think I just want to be very aware of going into some place with that kind of traumatic or negative history for my own sake and my own protection.
Right.
But also, too, ensuring, like, if I was doing an investigation in a place, I would want to make sure, if I was in addition to that team and it wasn't people I've normally investigated with, I'd want to know what their intentions are with everything. Because as you and I both know, editing can do wonders.
Mm-hmm.
And even if, in general, the investigation went well, and you felt like, oh, this was really portrayed in an informative and, positive light, it can always be edited for more drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be my big concern. But I think, I'm open to going so many places. Like, I want to go back to the Waffle House, because the few times that I've been there for different paranormal reasons, I've always gotten stuff from there. I've always had activity,
right?
Which has been amazing. But there's so many other places that I want to investigate. And I want to investigate some of the places that are not quite as known. Like, local here in Orange County, we have a housing tract that has an old cemetery kind of right in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And while the cemetery is very gated, like, here is the boundary of the cemetery, it's fairly well known, if you do any history on it, that gate does not by any means set the true boundary for what that cemetery was. So there is kind of a poltergeist-like situation, not in the trope of the Indian burial grounds, but in, like, these houses next to this cemetery are very much built on the graves of people.
Right.
So, I want to talk to those folks. Like, are things happening in that realm? Like, the house I live in is from 1920. We have activity here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not scary. It's not malicious. It shows up in fun little ways. Blueberry muffin smell in the middle of the night. So many times, and it's not my neighbors.
That's so funny. I feel like, and this is all my woo-woo, but I feel like the veil's gotten really thin, and sense of smell in exchange with the other side is at its height right now. Perfumes, smoke. I feel like that is one of the senses that isn't always that common. I know it's very common on paranormal investigations, but all of a sudden I think that is just very, very apparent. When you it's interesting what you were talking about, the history, because the Skinwalker Ranch, to me, a skinwalker, people don't really understand. A skinwalker that some American tribes still will not talk about because they're afraid they're calling it to them. But it was almost a way of revenge.
Right.
Like, it was like,
absolutely,
you don't ever conjure a skinwalker unless, and we pushed those tribes to unless we got them there, so that somebody conjured a skinwalker, which is still haunting that area today.
Well, and to me, why it does not surprise me that there is paranormal revenge. Because Lord knows white people have done a lot of awful, awful things in the name of colonialism and imperialism. And so, there are, we're in this time where everything is a demon.
Right.
And I know a lot of folks that talk about this, like, everything's a demon. Oh, it's a demon. It's a demon. But what if we think about the idea of we've disrespected somebody's culture so much that we've just named it a demon,
right? Instead
of actually understanding, oh, it's behaving in this way because you're disrespecting it so much. It's not actually a demon. And do some more research on the time and the land and the place.
Right. And, that's always very interesting to me because you were talking about the children, that reacted better to the women. Sometimes it's like you're the only woman in a place where probably women weren't allowed. That, you know what I mean? Or you were thought to be a prostitute. So you may be interfering sort of with that. And it's almost like this is the big one for me, though. It's the mental hospitals and the insane asylums, because I almost also wonder if my theory is that the actual soul of this being has gone forward, but there's something else that lives with that trauma that is in there, because those are, without a doubt, the most haunted and the most terrifying places where something could follow you home or something could really happen. And I do also believe those would be the places you would find a demon. If so, there's people on my podcast know there's an enormous array of things that can be between ghost and demon that are just as mischievous or troublesome. But I really do feel like, from the stories I know, that people that worked in mental hospitals, that a lot of patients come in possessed and are doing physical things that the human body is not capable of. Now, when those places close down or those people pass away, I do believe that stuff stays and festers on the fear and of other people. I got very scary really fast all of a sudden.
That's okay. That's okay. Because, it makes me think of a couple things when you bring up mental hospitals and insane asylums, because one, so many of those have been repurposed into different things over the years, right? Mm-hmm. And so the kind of energy that has transpired in those places in so many different forms, I think can also lead to what shows up in those places.
Right. It attracts it. Yeah.
It makes me also think about the idea of what I've heard referred to as an intentional haunting, which is a space that maybe wasn't actually haunted, but so many people have brought the idea or their own baggage to that space that that's what sticks around in that space.
Yeah, they create it.
And, I also think, too, when it comes to issues of mental health and issues of, because if you think about the history of the sanitarium and the insane asylums in the United States and in different parts of the Western world, but for many years, some of those places were considered like, this is where you went to like regain your health, right? You needed structure, you needed discipline, you needed different things in order to get you back to a quote unquote sane place. But you also had people that were locked away because we didn't have the type of diagnoses that we do today, right? We did not understand autistic spectrum disorder. We did not understand epilepsy. We did not understand bipolar. We didn't understand all of these things. Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder started as shell shock in in the physician's desk reference, volume 1, right? Starts as shell shock, leaves edition 2, comes back as PTSD in volume 3. And so even our ideas about mental health have changed over so many centuries and decades in the United States, right? What we really understand. And so that is another thing where it's like, I also wonder if in those spaces, thinking about like, maybe, a spirit that would not be a demon, but is, originates from some other culture or a tribal culture or an indigenous American, something like that, right? That then gets labeled a demon. Are we doing the same things in those spaces when we're talking about, oh my gosh, this crazy activity that's happening, or this weird activity that's happening, and what's happening is we're not understanding the mental condition of what that person went through.
That could be, but believe me, I've had one encounter with demonic stuff. It's different.
Oh,
it's not just, but the other thing is these places talk about history. They tell us this is where they pulled out everybody's teeth. This is where they did this. This is where they did that. And it closed in 1982. And you go,
exactly
82? Like, which leads me to believe somewhere that's still going on now. Like,
sure.
We're not civilized at all.
Oh, and they have kinder names for places. Like, we have what would be considered like a mental health institution not very far from where I live, and it's referred to as a developmental center.
Oh my God. And in Utica, where my sister, we go sometimes, it's abandoned now. It's all shut down, but it's called the Utica Lunatic Asylum.
Oh.
I know. There's no hiding. Right. There's no stigma with that. But yeah, that's amazing. So it's the developmental. Yeah, that's right. Nice
developmental
names.
Center.
Wow.
And I want to go back to something for like that you just mentioned is, when you encounter dark or demonic energy,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that, because some of my earliest paranormal experiences had to deal with dark energy and dark beings.
Oh, tell us.
Very different than cute child ghosts in the Waffle
or
House.
even just a mischievous thing that is, it's just, if things in your apartment are moving that aren't supposed to, that is terrifying. It doesn't. Oh yeah. It doesn't mean might not even mean it's mean. What is doing it? Yeah.
But it's still like, oh, what was that? Like even the other day here in the house, I had the bathroom door shut, and I have 2 dogs. And one of them loves, if you're in the restroom, will come and lay outside the bathroom and like fall like, hey, I'm here. Just need to let you know I'm here. And that laying down always causes a very heavy kind of bang on the door. And so the door moves in a very specific, like, oh, that's Rose laying down kind of way. Mm-hmm. And that happened the other day. And I was like, oh, Rose must be outside. So I opened the door to say hi to her. And nothing was there. Right. Right. So it's like, oh, but at the same time, I'm like, okay. And we have recently found the name of the man that passed in our house. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to be very respectful. So I usually say hi to him when something like that happens, because I think it might be him, but I need to do some deeper research, because he was the second owner of this house, and I want to find out what happened to the first owners of this house. Yeah. But going back, you were asking about these dark experiences, being empathic and feeling things like, ooh, I'm definitely the person that'll walk into a room, and if I don't feel comfortable, I will walk right out of that room. Mm-hmm. See you all later. Yeah. But when I was about 15 years old, I was spending the night at a friend's house. And to note, a lot of these dark experiences that I've had, but I'll share this one with you all, seem to be tied into other people, not into me. Like, they're not coming after me. They seem to be around other people, and I kind of
got to watch
sense them.
Yeah.
Got to watch, or I've seen them. So we were spending the night at my friend's house. As 2 teenage girls were in her bed getting ready to go to sleep. And the ceiling in the room shifted, and I opened my eyes, and I had not fallen asleep yet. I'll be very clear on that. We had not gone to sleep yet. And I woke up and saw above me 2 dark hooded figures, and one standing on each side of the bed. And I said to her, hey, friend, do you see those figures? She's like, I do see those figures. I was like, okay. And so we just started praying and asking that they go away. So that was a very like, oh, those two things are not awesome. And we don't want those around. But I wasn't the only one that saw that, right? I had another experience where late night, myself and some friends were hanging out in my bedroom, and a friend of mine started like just being crazy and wild. And I felt like I could sense something else in the room with us. And I knew exactly where it was. It was over by, and at the time I said, sitting in this desk chair of mine. And my friend was just saying crazy stuff. And the other friend started saying crazy stuff. And they were just doing weird things. No one was on drugs. No one was drunk. Just note that too. I know it's like teenage days. Wasn't like that.
Right.
I'm like the prudest person in that way. But the next morning, and we talked about it. Like, I sensed something in this room, and we had this conversation about sensing these things in the room. And the next morning I said to the one friend, oh, do you remember doing this, this, and this? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And the other friend was like, yeah, you did all these things last night. How do you not remember? And then the friend that didn't remember, and I said to the other friend, well, do you remember doing all these things? And that friend was like, no, I don't remember. Like, they had no memory of what had happened. And then I said, well, do you both remember the conversation we had about the entity in the room? They're like, nope.
See, I've never
weird stuff.
Yeah, I've never. I don't believe that I've ever fully told my story yet on this podcast. And actually, it's very interesting because it was right around the time that we did that at the Wheeler house that the whole thing came to a head.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was very outside of myself during that investigation because of what had happened right before. But here's the interesting thing. What always happens is from my shins down starts to get very, very cold, even when I think about it. So I'm always like, nope, not today. Today's not the day I tell that story because I don't need to invite it in. I believe the thing is where it is and it's got its target or whatever. But once we started talking about it and I was like, maybe I'll tell her right now because it has to do with the Wheeler house. And then the Waffle House. And then I was like, oops, nope, there's that feeling. Not today.
Well, and I think, that's one of those things that's really important too, right? Like, I've shared those stories with people who I feel like I'm ready to share those stories with. And I think that is one of the important things too. And I love that you bring that up, Karen, because it's so important if you want to share your story, whatever that story is, whether it be paranormal or something personal in other ways, like it's so important to know when it's time and when it's not time.
Right.
And for you, if you're like, oh, this is not the time, absolutely great. You'll know when the time is, and maybe that time will never come, and that's fine too. But I definitely don't share these stories out with everyone,
right? Because
of the fact that, number one, not everyone's a safe person to tell stories to. It's just hard, But also, number two is it's like, does that story and do those things serve that space and that place? Right?
And do they, I feel like there are two things that I know I have a connection with. And if I focused on them, they'd both show up and I don't need either one.
Sure. And that's really important to know as well. Like I can lightly talk about the activity that happens in this house, in my house, because it's not malicious.
Right.
It's not dark. It's not scary, because I'll tell you, if it was, I would not be having the same conversation with you about it. Right. I don't need to draw
trouble.
Darkness into my life or stir up trouble. Like I want to bring light towards me, and I want to send light out to people. Like that is, I am about love. I am about compassion. I feel like part of my kind of gifting in this world is being able to see who people truly are and who they're truly meant to be, which sounds very like, inspirational, but like I've seen people and gone like, ooh, if you get past this, you're going to like step into something so incredible.
Right.
You're going to step into something so magical. And not everyone's ready to hear that.
Right.
You know, there are some people that are like, I want to know, and other people are like, I don't want to know. And so, you know, I'm definitely, like I said, I'm open to these kinds of things, but I, like you, I don't want to draw darkness towards me. I don't want to draw, and again, like I said, I don't want to do violence to people.
Yeah, there's a definite difference between being, I enjoy, oh my God, the time flew by. I enjoy being a little afraid on a ghost hunt with that alertness and that awareness, and I'm in the moment. But this other thing was not like that. So I enjoy a good story. For some reason, I think this is because I'm old now, but I can't watch horror movies before bed. I don't know what that's about. That went away. That was the greatest thing ever when I was young. But yeah, it's almost like right now there is the intake valve for our brains is at a very different space.
Oh yeah. And you talk about the horror movie thing. I think about the amount of violence that I could watch in films when I was younger.
Yeah.
I can't do the same now. And I think, honestly, that's because we're more aware of the world.
Right.
Like, when you're younger and you're less in tune to the news or what's actually happening in the world, it's very easy to be like, violence or horror. But then you're like, oh, there's true terrible violence that's happening, and there's true horror in this world. I'm good.
Right.
I'm good.
Do you ever watch that show? I'm completely in love with this show, What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes, I love What We Do in the Shadows.
Okay. So that guy that is he has to be the greatest actor ever, that he's Norad? No, that you know who I mean. He's the tall, handsome guy with the long black hair. I guess that's all of them. That character in a very dark way, because he's the conqueror. He was the relentless. So he's conquered all these places. That's the thing about humor, is people don't realize that humor is things going wrong, people doing bad things. That was the whole point of Seinfeld, was these were awful people and you loved them. And
right.
I always think that character in a weird way is that Saudi prince that murdered the Washington Reporter. Because that Saudi prince, when you look at him, he is very handsome. He is almost as handsome as the actor on that show. And yet he's this handsome guy in charge, but I almost could see like that is a weird connection to me that I always make, that, yeah, that's that guy talking about conquering countries. That's the Saudi prince. So it's just a weird connection there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that is where, the line between entertainment and reality is so much more blurred.
Right. And it's 200 years ago. It's 1,000 years ago that he conquered these. So it's kind of funny now.
Right.
But
and I don't want to do any spoilers on most recent episodes by any means.
Oh, I know. I think I saw
it.
It was so
that
good.
kind of idea comes up recently, right?
Yeah.
And I'm even thinking about, in this time of quarantine and stay-at-home orders, about, in the late 90s, early 2000s is when we have the huge shift from production television to reality television, right?
Right.
And now we're seeing this extra shift from reality television to reality television through Zoom and Skype and,
I know.
these other ways, right? So my culture brain is like exploding. But man, do I still love a really good, like a well-produced, good, awesome movie. Like I'm coming soon is the new movie Shirley, about Shirley Jackson, the horror writer.
Fascinating.
Amazing.
Okay.
And so there's those things that we need to still escape with, but I'm with you. There's a lot of stuff I cannot easily watch. And because I jokingly say, even when I'm watching and trying to distract myself with something else, I always look up at the worst time.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny.
I always look up at the worst time.
I always, it's very funny because I think I've watched that series, What We Do in the Shadows. I think I've watched the whole thing twice because I have a trigger, and I have the news totally off today. I've been triggered this last couple weeks with stuff and that I shouldn't be. I know we're all supposed to be looking at ourselves, so I've been doing that, which is not easy, but it is. I was like, I really needed those laughs.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I think that going towards things that bring us comfort and bring us laughter and bring us joy, like to me, there is nothing better, right? And you know this also, being a comedian, there is nothing better than when something is so smart and so funny, you laugh so hard that sound stops coming out. Like that gut-busting, amazing, tears streaming down your face laughter.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of things that happen to, like, that we need in every day, right? And especially now, because what is really happening right now is people are sick, people are dying. This is freaking zany. Like, my mom who's 70 is like, I never lived through anything like this. Your grandmother didn't live through anything like this, right? Like, I think about the flu epidemic of 1918, right? And it was still so different then. But that's like the last kind of pandemic that we had in that same sense. But and
you just want to go, well, we weren't civilized then. We didn't have, people then didn't have Amazon. Of course they had a pandemic. Well, and then you're like, but it can happen now.
The biggest thing I think that is happening for people and what people are truly rallying against is the death of convenience.
Yes.
People hate that things are not convenient right now. And some people have embraced it. Some people are like, I guess I'm baking bread now. I guess I make my own cashew milk, like whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
But people are rallying, they are raging against this death of convenience. And for me, I have to really take breaks from the news. I'll check in a little bit, but in general, I take breaks because it's too much.
Right.
But we're just in a microscope, because I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and she said, am I scared that my family could get sick and die? Yes. Am I scared that I could lose my job and not have money coming in? Yes. And I said to her, but isn't that what we think about all the time?
Yeah.
Because the reality is that those kinds of things could happen to us all the time. Like I'm so grateful that I'm working during this time.
Oh my God.
But I'm also grateful that I'm working anytime, because I am aware that there are people living in poverty. I am aware, but I'm aware of those things all the time, and it is more magnified. It is more extreme right now, because the fact that, an elementary school closing means that certain kids don't get to eat.
Right. That's terrifying.
Oh, it's terrifying. Absolutely. But we do need those reprieves. We do need incredible laughter. We do need silliness.
Right.
We do need to, I took a walk this morning, and what I try and do is really, it sounds cliche, but stop and smell the roses and look at nature. Oh, look at this beautiful nature. Look at this silly sign. Look at the, notice the neighborhood that I have the ability to walk around in, because friends of mine in other parts of the world have not, it's starting to let up a little bit, but they haven't been able to actually even leave their house.
Right.
And we have that privilege.
I have two of the best things that came out of this. In fact, in 10 minutes, I have a Zoom meeting with my mom and my sister. Every day we have a Zoom meeting, and we knit, and we make, right now we're making felted coasters. But we do that for 40 minutes every day. And then I also, we finally got them to accept an iPad, because they don't want anything else to do with computers. They used to, but I put my phone on the front of my bike and I FaceTime with them, and they're in upstate New York and just got snow again. And they just love to look at the houses. So I ride my bike for like 3 hours and I show them the houses. So, so that was kind of that was something that, that's better than shopping online. Let's say it that way.
It's better than shopping online, and it's intentional time with people you love.
Right. Right. Before it's too late. Well, Darcy,
Before it's too late.
thank you so much. I'm glad we finally got to do this. This was fantastic.
Me too, Karen. I've had such a great time talking to you, and I look forward when we get to actually connect in person again and hopefully do some more investigations together again.
Absolutely. So everybody can find you at Darcy Staniforth, and that is on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm going to spell that for everybody, and it'll be in the show notes. DarcyStaniforth. What a wonderful conversation. All right, we're going to have to finish this again.
Yes, I'd love to come back.
All right, my dear. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media. We will see you all next week.